From tropical getaways turned deadly to disappearances in dream destinations. Vacation Gone Wrong uncovers the chilling true stories of travelers who vanished, were murdered, or encountered the unexplainable while far from home. Welcome to the dark side of tourism. It was October 2003, and 26-year-old Tina Thomas had just married the man of her dreams, Gabe Watson. They had known each other for years, meeting through mutual friends in Birmingham, Alabama. Tina, bright and kind, worked in the office of a local business. Gabe, an avid scuba diver, was known for his love of underwater exploration. He was quiet, sometimes awkward, but loyal, at least on the surface. Their wedding was simple and traditional. Friends and family described it as beautiful. But behind the ceremony smiles and honeymoon plans, some had noticed cracks. Tina's father, Tommy Thomas, later recalled his discomfort. He felt Gabe was controlling, even possessive. Tina, who had a pacemaker due to a heart condition, sometimes seemed anxious around her new husband. Still, no one imagined what was to come. For their honeymoon, the newlyweds booked the trip of a lifetime, a 12-day holiday to Australia. It was to be a dream adventure, a romantic escape to a world of coral reefs, tropical sun, and unforgettable memories. But for Tina, it would be the last trip she ever took. Australia's Great Barrier Reef is one of the world's most breathtaking natural wonders. Stretching over 1,400 miles along the Queensland coast. It's a diver's paradise, a kaleidoscope of coral and marine life unlike anywhere else. For Gabe, a certified diver, it was the perfect chance to show Tina his world beneath the waves. Tina, on the other hand, wasn't an experienced diver. In fact, she had only recently obtained her certification after Gabe insisted they dive together on their honeymoon. She was nervous, but eager to please. This was, after all, meant to be a bonding experience, their first big adventure as husband and wife. On October 22, 2003, the couple boarded the Sport, a commercial dive boat operated by Mike Ball Dive Expeditions. They set off to dive at the historic Yongala shipwreck, a sunken passenger ship that had gone down during a cyclone in 1911. Today, it's one of the most sought-after dive spots in the world, and one of the most challenging. The wreck lies 30 meters, about 100 feet below the surface. The current is strong, the descent steep. For skilled divers, it's a thrill. For beginners, it can be overwhelming. The stage was set. Tina and Gabe suited up, posed for pictures, and prepared to descend into the deep dot. At 11 a.m., the couple entered the water, according to Gabe. Just minutes into the dive, something went horribly wrong. He claimed Tina panicked. She was having trouble with her buoyancy and began to sink. Gabe said he tried to help her, even attempted to give her air from his own regulator, but eventually had to make a choice: stay with Tina and risk them both drowning, or go for help. He chose to ascend. By the time dive instructors reached Tina, she was unconscious and drifting on the ocean floor near the wreck. They brought her up, but it was too late. Despite CPR attempts on the boat, Tina was pronounced dead. Gabe, reportedly distraught, was seen weeping on the deck. He told authorities she had simply sunk, too fast, too deep. That there was nothing he could do. That it was an accident, but the dive crew wasn't convinced. Almost immediately, inconsistencies in Gabe's story began to emerge. First, experienced divers on the boat questioned why he had left Tina rather than signal for help underwater, a standard protocol in emergency diving. Second, they noted that Gabe, who had over 50 dives under his belt, hadn't seemed panicked after surfacing. Then came the most suspicious detail. Tina's body was found with her dive weights still attached. For non-divers, that means she couldn't float, It's one of the first rules of diving. In an emergency, drop your weights. But Tina's were still fastened. Had she panicked too much to remove them? Or had someone made sure she couldn't surface? Witnesses later told investigators that Gabe had been strangely calm in the hours after Tina's death. He refused to speak to Australian police without a lawyer. He cut the trip short and returned to the US with his wife's body, but not without requesting an insurance payout. First, Australian authorities grew suspicious. They suspected Gabe may have turned the honeymoon into a death trap. Tina's body was flown back to the United States. And while her family mourned, investigators in Australia were already raising red flags. The initial autopsy, performed by Australian pathologist Dr. David Williams, suggested something unusual. There were no signs of natural causes that could explain her death. No heart failure. No embolism. No stroke. She had drowned. But the circumstances didn't add up. Tina's air tank was found to be over half full, meaning she hadn't run out of oxygen. Her dive computer showed no evidence of a rapid ascent or erratic movements until the final moments. Instead, it showed a slow descent, followed by nothing. Silence. She had simply stopped. Adding to the confusion were several bruises found on her body, specifically around her arms. The marks were consistent with being grabbed or restrained. Could someone have held her underwater? To the investigators, a chilling theory began to form. What if Tina hadn't drowned accidentally at all? What if she had been pushed or held beneath the waves by the very man she had just married? The investigation turned sharply toward motive, and what they found made jaws drop. Just before the trip, Gabe had encouraged Tina to change her life insurance policy. Not only that, but he had asked to be made the sole beneficiary. Her father, Tommy Thomas, later revealed that Tina had told him Gabe was pressuring her to make changes to her financial accounts, including her savings, life insurance, and even her will. Although the couple was not wealthy, Tina did have a life insurance policy valued at around $130,000. And Gabe, after returning home, wasted no time trying to collect it. According to the Thomas family, Gabe's request came within days of Tina's funeral. The timing was suspicious. So was his behavior. He refused to give Tina's family access to her belongings, including her purse, camera, and passport. He took control of all communication with Australian authorities. When asked to speak to detectives again, he declined, unless they paid for his legal expenses, if it wasn't for his own safety. What was Gabe afraid of? Back in Queensland, detectives and diving experts began reconstructing the dive step by step. Using data from Tina's dive computer, statements from witnesses, and simulation dives, they created a timeline of what likely happened that day. Here's what they found. The couple descended together to about 30 feet. Gabe signaled to Tina to stop. Perhaps she was descending too fast. Moments later, their dive computers stopped recording synchronized movement. Gabe ascended rapidly. Too rapidly for standard dive safety. Tina's computer showed her descending another 10 to 15 feet, and then flatlined. Dive experts who reviewed the simulation noted several issues. Why did Gabe abandon her so quickly? Even in distress, divers are trained to stay with their partner. He was stronger, more experienced, and had options. Why didn't he drop her weights or inflate her buoyancy vest? Two simple actions could have saved her life. Why did he wait almost 90 seconds before signaling for help? In diving emergencies, seconds matter. Yet Gabe surfaced, swam calmly to the boat, and didn't seem in a rush. Even more damning, several divers reported seeing Gabe holding Tina underwater just moments before she drowned. Australian police believed they had a case for murder. In 2005, after 2 years of investigation, Queensland authorities issued an arrest warrant for Gabe Watson, charging him with murder. But there was a problem. Gabe was now in the United States. Extradition between countries isn't always simple. It requires cooperation, diplomacy, and often a political balancing act. The U.S. State Department initially resisted extraditing an American citizen for a possible death penalty case. Australia, which does not have capital punishment, assured them they would not seek the death penalty, only prison time. In 2008, after prolonged legal wrangling, Gabe agreed to return to Australia, but only under the condition that he would face manslaughter, not murder charges. And so, 5 years after Tina's death, Gabe Watson returned to the very place where his wife had drowned. The trial commenced in June 2009. The prosecution painted a dark portrait of Gabe Watson as a manipulative husband who had meticulously planned Tina's death for financial gain. They alleged that he turned off her air supply underwater, let her sink, and then surfaced with a story about panic and helplessness. Their evidence: his own diving expertise, his odd behavior before and after the death, his repeated focus on insurance and control of Tina's affairs, the bruises, the expert witness testimony, the damning silence of his actions. But the defense fired back, saying Gabe had panicked, that it was a tragic accident, that Tina was inexperienced, possibly overwhelmed by the dive and her own physical condition. They said Gabe was a poor communicator, not a killer. In a surprise twist, the court accepted a guilty plea for manslaughter. Gabe was sentenced to 4.5 years, reduced to 18 months, with parole. Many called it a slap on the wrist. Tina's family was devastated. When Gabe Watson returned to Alabama in 2010, after serving just over a year in Australia, many in the United States, especially Tina's family, were outraged. To them, justice had not been served. A young, healthy woman died under suspicious circumstances, and her husband, the only witness, had walked free after a brief stint in a foreign prison. Tommy and Cindy Thomas, Tina's parents, didn't give up. They began pressuring U.S. authorities to take action. After all, Gabe was a U.S. citizen. Tina was buried in the United States, and her family believed that the events surrounding her death, including the insurance motive, deserved a much closer look. Eventually, the Alabama Attorney General's office took notice. In 2010, they announced capital murder charges against Gabe Watson, accusing him of plotting Tina's death before the trip even began. The charge: capital murder during a kidnapping, alleging that Gabe tricked Tina into diving with him, knowing she wouldn't survive. If convicted, he could face life in prison without parole. The prosecution's theory was bold. Gabe lured Tina into international waters, isolated her on a dive site he knew was dangerous, and murdered her, all to collect on life insurance. They pointed to his odd behaviors. Before the trip, his insistence on being the sole beneficiary on Tina's policy, his pressuring her to sign financial documents, his unusual comments about dive equipment and safety procedures. They even uncovered emails suggesting Gabe had scouted the Yongala wreck in advance and knew how strong the current was, dangerous even to experienced divers. But there was a problem. The evidence was circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses to the alleged murder, no physical proof Gabe sabotaged Tina's gear, no signed confession. And under cross-examination, some of the prosecution's experts began to falter. The defense argued that the charges were a second attempt to punish Gabe for something Australia had already resolved: double jeopardy. In disguise, they claimed this was a grieving family and a media circus trying to villainize a man who had simply panicked in a terrifying moment. And then came the collapse. Just 1 week into the trial, the judge threw out the capital murder charges, citing lack of evidence and legal overreach. Gabe Watson walked free again. The case became an international media frenzy. TV specials, documentaries, podcasts, and major networks all picked up the story. Shows like 2020's, Dateline NBC, and 48 Hours ran deep dives into the tragedy. Gabe Watson was dubbed the Honeymoon Killer in headlines, a nickname that stuck. Photos of the couple smiling in their scuba gear appeared next to grim headlines about murder, betrayal, and international justice failures. Interviews with Tina's grieving parents played across American news outlets, while Gabe maintained a low profile, refusing most media appearances and living quietly in Alabama. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some believed Gabe had gotten away with murder. Others saw him as socially awkward and unlucky, not malicious. But the facts remained. A young woman was dead, and her last moments were spent underwater, surrounded by confusion, panic, and silence with only her husband nearby. Criminal justice had failed them, at least in the eyes of Tina's family. But there was one avenue left: civil court. In 2012, the Thomas family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Gabe Watson. Unlike a criminal trial, where guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, civil court only required a preponderance of the evidence. This meant, if the jury believed it was more likely than not that Gabe was responsible for Tina's death, he could be held financially accountable. The Thomases didn't seek revenge. They didn't even care about the money. They wanted a public record. A court statement. Something. Anything. That said Gabe Watson was responsible. But the case never made it to trial. The parties eventually reached a confidential settlement out of court. The details remain sealed. No public admission of guilt. No official conclusion. For Tina's parents, it was a quiet, unsatisfying end to a near-decade-long legal war to the world. Gabe Watson remains a mystery. His public persona was shaped by courtroom sketches, dive photos, and tabloid headlines. But very little is known about his life post-trials. He returned to Birmingham, Alabama, where he reportedly remarried. The identity of his second wife remains private. Some local reports suggest he resumed work in the maintenance or heating and cooling industry. But he's kept a low profile. Friends from before the tragedy say he was awkward, sometimes obsessive, and extremely introverted. Tina's family described him as cold and calculating, especially in how he handled her death, the funeral, and her belongings. But the question that haunts every observer is this: was Gabe Watson a shy, emotionally stunted man who simply panicked underwater and made the worst mistake of his life? Or was he a calculated manipulator, using the remoteness of international waters and the chaos of the dive to commit the perfect murder? There is no definitive answer. Despite years of court battles, investigations, and forensic reconstructions, several chilling questions remain unresolved. Why didn't Gabe activate Tina's buoyancy device? Experts testified it would have taken seconds, potentially saving her life. Why didn't he drop her weight belt? This is standard in diving emergencies. Instead, Tina's weight belt was still secured when she was found. Why did Gabe wait so long to call for help? Dive instructors said he surfaced and swam back to the boat before alerting anyone. That delay may have cost Tina her life. Why was Tina pressured to change her life insurance policy just weeks before the trip? And why did Gabe attempt to collect it so quickly after her death? Why was he seen calmly folding towels on the dive boat just hours after Tina drowned? Multiple witnesses said his behavior was oddly calm. These aren't just technicalities. They form a pattern, a portrait of intent, or at the very least, gross indifference. From the moment Tina Watson's lifeless body was pulled from the waters near the Yungala wreck, the media latched on and never let go. There was something tragically cinematic about the case: a beautiful bride, a scenic honeymoon in paradise, an experienced diver, a mysterious death, and a husband accused of the unthinkable. Television networks across the globe jumped in 60 minutes. Australia aired exclusive interviews with dive crew members and Tina's family, painting Gabe as cold, distant, and calculated. Dateline NBC aired a full-length special titled Deadly Dive, exploring every twist in the dual-continent case. 2020's featured home videos, wedding footage, and an emotional sit-down with Tina's father. But this attention came at a cost. Legal experts warned that the media frenzy might have tainted juries and pressured prosecutors into building a case with limited evidence. Others argued the spotlight was necessary, that, without it, Gabe might have never faced charges at all. For many watching at home, it wasn't about what could be proven in court. It was about what felt wrong in their gut, and something about Gabe Watson's story just didn't sit right. For dive instructors and recreational divers, the Yangala wreck was never quite the same after Tina's death. Tour operators tightened restrictions, especially for inexperienced divers. Some refused to take newly certified divers to the wreck at all, citing the current, the depth, and the emotional weight the site now carried. The tragedy became a case study in dive safety. Classes around the world. Why didn't her buddy follow standard rescue protocols? How could an experienced diver panic so quickly and do so little? What can go wrong when one partner is significantly more skilled than the other? Tina's death wasn't just a mystery. It was a warning, a reminder that beneath the beauty of the ocean lies danger, and that trust between diving partners is a matter of life or death. To truly understand the case, you have to ask, what kind of person lets their wife die and resurfaces alone, then walks away? Some criminal psychologists who reviewed Gabe Watson's behavior noted traits of emotional detachment and narcissistic control. He had pressured Tina into financial changes, controlled travel plans, and dive details, insisted on scuba diving despite her discomfort, seemed emotionally disconnected after her death. One profiler described it as coercive control turned fatal, not necessarily an act of rage, but of manipulation and cold calculation. The idea wasn't just to kill Tina, but to ensure he did so in a way that could be written off as an accident. Others push back. They say, Gabe Watson was socially awkward, not malicious. An introvert who panicked underwater, made poor decisions, and suffered for it. A man villainized by the media, but not legally proven to be a killer, in the end. Even experts remain divided. What's clear is this: Gabe Watson did not act like a husband consumed by grief. He acted like someone who had already moved on. After Tina's funeral in Alabama, her body was buried at Greenlawn Memorial Gardens in her hometown. But for her family, especially her father, Tommy Thomas, the final resting place wasn't enough. In the years following her death, the Thomases created a permanent memorial site in their backyard. It wasn't a place of sadness, but a symbol of Tina's kindness, curiosity, and gentle spirit. They built a small garden filled with her favorite flowers. A plaque reads, "In loving memory of Christina May Thomas Watson, a light extinguished too soon." It became a space for quiet reflection and for processing the pain that justice had not brought closure. Every year, on the anniversary of Tina's death, friends and family gather, not in a courtroom, but under trees and sky, to tell stories, light candles, and keep her memory alive. In 2012, news broke that Gabe Watson had remarried. The woman, a schoolteacher named Kim Lewis, was reportedly aware of his past, the trials, the death, the accusations, and still chose to marry him. For Tina's family, it was a bitter pill to swallow: a man who had never expressed public remorse, who had walked away with no prison time in the U.S., who now had a new wife, a new life, and possibly a fresh start. Some called it redemption. Others called it an erasure. His remarriage was kept largely private. No public photos, no interviews. Gabe Watson, who once stood at the center of an international scandal, had melted into anonymity, but that, perhaps, was the plan all along. While the legal system debated Gabe's guilt, those who were on the dive boat that day never seemed to question what they saw or what they felt. Many crew members described the atmosphere on the boat after Tina's death as chilling, not just because of the tragedy, but because of Gabe's behavior. He folded towels. He offered logistical advice. He asked about schedules. One diver later said, it was like he was organizing a lunch break, not grieving his wife. They remember Tina, how nervous she looked on deck before the dive, how she tried to smile in photos. They remember her quiet courage, and how quickly joy turned to confusion. Then to horror. Years later, many of those crew members still refuse to return to the Yongala wreck. They say, it's not just a graveyard for a sunken ship, it's where innocence drowned in silence. Tina Watson's name didn't disappear into legal archives or crime databases. Instead, it lives on in scuba diving training materials around the world. Her story is now used in dive safety courses, particularly those aimed at newly certified divers or couples diving together. Instructors reference the Watson case when explaining the importance of equipment checks, buoyancy control, and buddy systems. Some courses even feature case breakdowns, where students are asked, what would you have done differently? Where did the safety net break? How can a diver's silence become someone else's death sentence? It's morbid, but necessary. Tina's case revealed how a simple lack of intervention, a failure to act, could turn a mishap into a fatality, and her story continues to save lives in ways that justice could not. Though 2 countries tried Gabe Watson in court, dozens of alternative theories and overlooked details still circulate in online forums and among armchair detectives. Here are a few that remain unanswered. The air sabotage theory. Some believe Gabe tampered with Tina's equipment before the dive, either by adjusting the regulator or partially disabling her buoyancy compensator. No proof was ever found, but doubts linger due to Gabe's technical dive knowledge. The push and release scenario. A few dive professionals suspect Gabe physically held Tina down long enough to cause panic, then let her go once she was past the point of rescue. It would leave no clear bruises or obvious forensic trail. The planned panic idea. One chilling theory suggests Gabe coached Tina improperly, either deliberately or negligently, knowing that she'd be overwhelmed, underwater, and unable to manage herself. If she panicked, he'd have a built-in excuse. None of these theories were proven in court, but in the court of public opinion, they've become the foundation of widespread suspicion. In the era of Reddit, YouTube, and true crime podcasts, the Tina Watson case found a second life. It's discussed in forums like r Unresolved Mysteries, featured in YouTube explainers, and debated on shows like Crime Junkie and Sword and Scale. Online sleuths pore over dive logs, timelines, and court transcripts. Some claim to have spotted inconsistencies in witness statements. Others reanalyze Gabe's posture in photos, dissect his word choices in interviews, and scrutinize everything from his delay in surfacing to the way he filled out customs forms. While some argue this crowdsourced analysis is disrespectful, others say it keeps Tina's case alive and helps apply pressure to a justice system that too often lets victims down. Either way, the public fascination continues. The headline, Honeymoon Horror, has become shorthand for something deeper. The idea that even love, even celebration, can hide something sinister. There's something particularly disturbing about a honeymoon death. It's supposed to be the Start of something beautiful. The first chapter of a new life together. A celebration of love, unity, and shared dreams. So when that chapter is cut short, especially by violence or suspicion, it feels like a betrayal of more than just one person. It shakes our trust in the idea of safety itself. The belief that love protects us. Tina's death didn't happen in a war zone or a remote jungle. It happened in paradise. With someone she loved. On a dive that should have been a bonding experience, not a burial. That's part of why this case refuses to fade. It's not just about crime. It's about shattered illusions. Tina and Gabe's story is not an isolated one. Across the world, other cases have emerged of honeymooners who vanished, died under strange circumstances, or were murdered by the very person they pledged their lives to. Tina and Gabe Watson, Australia, 2003, suspicious drowning. Husband survives. Motive suspected. Insurance, Shaney and Andrew Bagby, USA, 2001, not a honeymoon, but a breakup turned homicide. A woman kills her partner, then later her own child, sparking legal reforms. Jordan and Shirley Graham, Bahamas, 2013, a newlywed. Wife pushes her husband off a cliff in Glacier National Park, just 8 days after their wedding. She later pleads guilty to second-degree murder. Each of these cases reminds us that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from outside threats, but from the person beside us. While the public continues to speculate, legal experts have weighed in on the Tina Watson case from multiple angles. Some argue the case highlights a dangerous flaw in international justice systems, where the burden of proof becomes nearly impossible when incidents occur far from home. In foreign jurisdictions, with limited witnesses and evidence, others say the original prosecutors in Alabama overreached by pursuing a capital murder charge without solid physical evidence, which led to the dismissal and possibly closed the door to further criminal action in the U.S. There's also the issue of double jeopardy. Once Gabe served time in Australia, even on a lesser charge, it limited the kinds of charges he could face elsewhere. Despite new theories or motives surfacing later, but many agree on one point. If Gabe had acted differently after Tina's death, with more grief, more urgency, more transparency, it's possible the legal system and public opinion would have seen him in a very different light. Instead, he became the perfect suspect. Even if not the perfect killer, in the weeks leading up to their honeymoon. Tina Thomas Watson kept a personal journal and stayed in touch with friends via email. She seemed excited, but there were signs of anxiety, especially around the upcoming dive trip. In one email to a close friend, she wrote, "I'm nervous about diving. Gabe says, I'll be fine, but I keep having weird dreams about something going wrong." In her journal, a quiet pattern emerged. Little notes about trying to please Gabe, about not wanting to argue, about hoping this trip would help them connect more deeply as newlyweds. Some entries, in hindsight, seem haunting. "We argued last night. I didn't want to sign the insurance form, but Gabe said I was being dramatic. The dive instructors asked if I was ready. I said yes, but I wasn't." No one could have predicted that just days later, her words would be read in courtrooms. Here's a breakdown of the final days leading up to Tina's death. October 11th, 2003. Tina and Gabe are married in Birmingham, Alabama. Friends and family attend a modest ceremony. October 16th, they arrive in Sydney, Australia, and begin their honeymoon. Photos show them smiling in front of iconic sights. October 20th, they travel north to Queensland and prepare for the diving portion of their trip. Tina is reportedly nervous but compliant. October 21st. The couple boards the dive vessel Spoilsport with Mike Ball Dive Expeditions. Other tourists describe Tina as quiet, unsure. October 22nd. The dive at the Yangala wreck begins at 11 a.m. Tina and Gabe enter the water. Tina is seen descending but struggling. 11:08 a.m. Gabe resurfaces alone. He alerts no one for over a minute. 11:10 a.m. Tina's unconscious body is discovered. CPR is attempted on the dive boat but fails. Later that day, Gabe is observed. Folding towels, he offers no emotional breakdown. He refuses to speak to police without legal counsel. October 23rd, Tina's body is taken ashore. Gabe begins the process of returning to the U.S. That timeline, especially the delay between surfacing and seeking help, has become one of the most suspicious elements in the entire case. Publicly, Gabe Watson has remained largely silent. In the years since his legal battles ended, he's given a handful of media interviews, including a 2011 segment where he told 60 Minutes Australia, "I loved Tina, I didn't kill her. What happened was a tragedy, not a crime." In court documents and statements through lawyers, he's maintained that he simply panicked, that the dive became overwhelming, and that he wasn't trained for that level of emergency. He has not offered public apologies. He has not admitted wrongdoing. And he has never returned to the Yangala wreck. According to local sources, Gabe now lives quietly, avoiding press and public appearances. He has remarried, taken a new job, and rarely discusses the case. Whether this silence is a coping mechanism or a form of hiding is up for interpretation. For Tommy and Cindy Thomas, losing their daughter was just the beginning of their pain. In interviews over the years, they've described a sense of helplessness, not only at her death, but at how the system seemed to protect the man they believed killed her. They fought through 2 legal systems, endured multiple court cases, watched Gabe walk away twice. But they also built a legacy of strength. They lobbied for changes in international death investigations, demanding better protocols for when U.S. citizens die abroad. They created awareness around the rights of victims' families in wrongful death cases, and they continued to share Tina's story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of the human life at the center of every headline. Tommy once said, "We weren't chasing vengeance. We were chasing truth. And even when the law won't say it, we know what happened." Travel is supposed to bring people together. It's meant to be joyous, romantic, transformative, but Tina Watson's death, and others like it, reveal a darker truth. Even in paradise, danger can follow, especially when that danger is disguised as love. The case also reminds us how fragile trust can be. Gabe Watson wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a criminal in hiding. He was Tina's husband, someone she loved, someone her family welcomed, someone she believed would keep her safe, whether he planned her death or simply failed her in a moment of fear. The result was the same. She never came home. And for many travelers, especially women, that risk of being silenced, ignored, or blamed is part of the unspoken danger of venturing far from home. Tina Watson's case is one of the most chilling vacation tragedies in modern history. It involves love, betrayal, suspicion, and silence, all set against the backdrop of a breathtaking, dreamlike setting. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How well do we really know the people closest to us? What do we do when justice feels incomplete? And what happens when paradise turns into a prison? In the end, Tina's story is more than just a mystery. It's a warning, a symbol of what can happen when the person meant to protect you is the very person you need protection from. From tropical getaways turned deadly to disappearances in dream destinations, Vacation Gone Wrong uncovers the chilling true stories of travelers who vanished, were murdered, or encountered the unexplainable, while far from home. In this case, the beauty of the Great Barrier Reef masked a tragedy beneath the surface, one that still divides courts, communities, and families. Thank you for joining on this deep dive into the death of Tina Watson. If you found this episode powerful, please consider sharing her story and helping us shine a light on the victims who never got justice. Subscribe for more episodes of Vacation Gone Wrong. Like this video to support victim advocacy. Your thoughts: was it murder or a tragic mistake?